The web of influence in London, the room that planned storms, had a new instrument, a microphone. Elspeth Grant, her face lit by a green desk lamp, circled a transcript with a red pencil. The BBC's African service had become more than a transmitter of facts. It was a precision tool, a scalpel to open old wounds. "We don't need brazen lies," she told a junior editor. "Just the right emphasis. A misplaced adjective here, a clipped sentence there. People will do the rest for us." They rehearsed an interview with Amadou Bello, premier of the northern region, or rather with the version of him they intended the nation to hear. In the studio feed, the questions were soft but pointed. Are you worried about Eastern influence in the North? Do you believe leadership positions are being taken from Northerners? The answers, when spoken, were earnest and complex. In the edit suite, they became short, furious fragments. They are taking our jobs. They must be removed. When the broadcast hit Lagos at dawn, the cut landed like a blow. Radios crackled across barracks, markets, and prayer halls. Men in uniforms who had trained alongside one another now heard a chief executive, a father of the North, seemingly declare open contempt for their Eastern comrades. The BBC's calm cadence lent the words gravity. The edit lent them rage. Across the country, resentment grew exact and personal. Eastern officers who had fought under the same flag and trusted the same institutions, felt betrayed by a leader the Empire's airwaves had transformed into an enemy. The lines between political speech and incitement blurred until they were indistinguishable. Back in London, Sir Andrew observed the morning dispatches with a quiet, satisfied patience. He felt like a chess player who had skillfully maneuvered his opponent into a losing position, forced to make predictable pawn moves. He was a master of understanding the intricate dance of pride and revenge. He knew that a carefully crafted provocation, one that painted the Northerners as the aggressors, would inevitably trigger a sharp and emotional reaction from the South. This Southern-led coup, in turn, would practically beg for a Northern counterstrike. The entire spiral of violence would appear spontaneous to the outside world, a tragic internal conflict. But the architecture of this chaos was meticulously designed, anything but spontaneous. To guarantee that the counter-coup would be swift and decisive, the Empire had been quietly grooming a willing instrument. His name was Colonel Musa Farouk, a man whose ambition was matched only by his deep-seated insecurities. The initial contact was made at a muted embassy reception. Farouk was flattered with exclusive access, drawn into a circle of influence, and supplied with the kind of assurances that corrupt hearts often mistake for genuine friendship. He was their man. In clandestine meetings, they showed him maps detailing troop movements and strategic locations. They briefed him on various contingencies, outlining how the Empire would respond to different scenarios. He was given a list of contact points, former colonial officers still in the country, sympathetic diplomats who could provide cover, and even a discreet radio channel for urgent, untraceable messages. In return for his cooperation, the Empire promised him wise counsel, logistical support, and, most importantly, continued patronage once the dust settled. He was guaranteed a place at the top of the new order. Meanwhile, in Lagos, the young majors who were planning the initial coup were sharpening their timelines, completely unaware they were walking into a trap. In Kaduna, they meticulously cross-checked the leaks they were receiving with sound bites from the BBC to their ears. There was a sick, confirming harmony. The news reports seemed to validate their concerns and justify their actions. The idea that their coup would be welcomed, or at least understood, by both the Nigerian public and foreign powers, began to harden from a hopeful assumption into a firm resolve. They rehearsed their plans in hushed corners of their dormitories, fueled by a powerful sense of moral clarity. They were convinced that the purity of their intentions would protect them from any negative consequences. But the Empire had already ensured something far darker. They had engineered a situation where any victory the majors might achieve would be Pyrrhic a victory that would cost them everything. The selective broadcast of Premier Bello's clipped furious statements, edited to sound menacing and ethnically charged, had already sown seeds of suspicion and division among army comrades. The counter-coup plotters, their sense of hurt and betrayal fueled by these broadcasts and stoked by their secret contacts with the Empire, were not going to seek reconciliation. They were being primed for retribution. And that retribution, when it came, would be messy, brutal, and tragically, it would be legitimized by the very narratives the BBC had so carefully spun. when the first shots were finally fired. The nation didn't see an army attempting to correct its own course or root out corruption as the majors had intended. Instead, thanks to the empire's masterful manipulation of information, the country saw itself cleaved in two, split along new, dangerous lines that the empire had redrawn. These lines of division were made precise not just by bullets, but by the subtle manipulation of a speaker's timbre, the cleverness of a sound edit, and the whispered promises delivered from London. The men who pulled the triggers on both sides of the conflict genuinely believed they were answering a higher patriotic call. The majors believed they were saving their nation from corruption. The counter-coup plotters believed they were avenging their leaders and restoring order. But the men in London who had engineered the call knew the true outcome. They had successfully ensured a new cycle of dependence. The perpetrators of the violence, no matter who came out on top, would be weak, isolated, and desperate. They would need counsel, they would need arms, and they would need the moral cover that only their old colonial patron could supply. The cycle of control would continue, just under a new name. That very evening, Elspeth's calm, authoritative voice came over the radio on the next BBC bulletin. She summarized what 1,000 edited syllables and carefully selected sound bites had already achieved. Nigerians, she announced gravely, now face a moment of grave uncertainty. International fronts stand ready to assist. Her words hung in the air, a perfect blend of concern and reassurance. And back in the corridors of the old empire, in the quiet offices of Whitehall, that assistance was already being scheduled. The chess master was preparing his next move, ready to manage the chaos he had so expertly created. The game was far from over. Thank you for watching. If you found this historical analysis insightful, please like this video, subscribe to our channel for more deep dives, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. We appreciate your support. The war was over, but peace had not begun. By 1970, Nigeria was on its knees. Its cities were scarred, its fields scorched, its families torn apart. The guns had fallen silent, but the silence itself was an accusation. For the Igbo people, who had been the architects of the young nation's dreams, the return was to a landscape of ruin and rationed survival. Their homes were gone, their bank accounts wiped clean, their very loyalty to the nation questioned. They were told they were part of a united Nigeria, but this unity felt hollow, a fragile truce whispered by victors who lived in fear that their captives might one day rise again. Into this tense quiet, the empire returned, not with soldiers and flags, but with contracts and briefcases. The oil fields of the Niger Delta became the new front line in a different kind of war. British and Allied corporations, who had been waiting in the wings, swooped in under the banner of reconstruction. Giants like Shell and BP, along with a host of other firms, secured exclusive rights to Nigeria's black gold. The deals were sealed through hastily written decrees, often drafted with the help of foreign legal experts. In smoke-filled boardrooms from Lagos to London, new treaties were signed. They no longer spoke of the British Crown, but of partnership and development. The tools had changed, but the change remained. A small circle within the post-war government saw the trap. They understood the true price of this so-called partnership, but they were in no position to refuse. Nigeria's treasury was empty, its government was fractured, and its people were deeply divided. Any attempt to negotiate for better terms, for a fairer share, was met with an invisible wall of pressure. There were whispers of embargoes, sudden delays in crucial shipments, and carefully crafted reports on the BBC painting any reformer as a radical or a communist. The same voice that had once narrated the coups in the conflict now narrated the recovery, skillfully shaping public perception and silencing dissent. Successive governments didn't just inherit power, they inherited dependence as a national policy. British advisors became a permanent fixture in the ministries of finance and defense, all under the guise of technical assistance programs. Retired colonial officers, who had once ruled the land, seamlessly transitioned into roles as powerful consultants. The very same empire that had once armed and fueled division now generously funded unity projects. But these projects were carefully selected, designed only to protect the economic arteries that pumped Nigeria's wealth outwards back to the West. Meanwhile, within the nation's heart, the ethnic wounds festered. The North jealously guarded its political power. The West clung to its commercial dominance, and the East nursed its wounded pride. a deep sense of betrayal that never healed. Every national debate, every discussion about the country's future inevitably collapsed into a pit of suspicion. Is this another plot by the East? Is this another grievance from the North? The seeds of fear and mistrust, so skillfully sown by the empire during the colonial era, had grown into a self-sustaining cycle of division. The ghosts of the past were now directing the future. In Enugu, an Igbo engineer was offered a lucrative contract with a British firm. He refused. His colleagues thought he was a fool. They built the roads, one of them argued. They control the oil. What choice do we have? The engineer replied quietly, his voice heavy with a truth they all knew but couldn't afford to admit. If we can say no, then we are still conquered. But his quiet protest, like so many others, ended in isolation. A single voice against a deafening chorus of necessity. It was a noble act, but ultimately a futile one. By the late 1970s, a new Nigeria was rising. Its skylines in Lagos shimmered with imported glass and steel, monuments built with foreign machinery. On the surface, the country was rich, awash in oil money. But beneath that glittering facade, it was perpetually indebted. It was a sovereign nation, yet it was perpetually managed by outside forces. The same BBC that had once broadcast the rhetoric of division now celebrated Nigeria's rapid modernization. It was a polished illusion, a comforting myth of progress broadcast to a world that had little interest in the messy truth of dependence. Back in the archives of Whitehall, in London, the old files were being updated. The file, once labeled Nigeria Political Stability Assessment, a relic of the colonial era, had long been replaced. The new file had a more modern, collaborative title, Nigeria's Strategic Cooperation Framework. The headings were different, the language was softer, but the underlying intention was exactly the same. Control had simply evolved, and far beneath the crushing weight of global diplomacy and international trade, the soul of a nation struggled to breathe. And within that nation, a people who had survived war and betrayal beat on their hearts, quietly searching for a way to belong to a country that still feared their return, a country that had yet to truly become their own. The struggle for true independence, for a genuine unity, was far from over. It had only just begun. Thank you for watching. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments below.